Thank you to Megan and Daniel. So for our last session of the day, talking about VR games, how the next platform will deepen the relationship between Hollywood and gaming. It is my absolute pleasure to bring on the stage Peter Levin, President of Interactive Ventures and Games at Lionsgate, and he'll be interviewed by Sherr, Executive Editor at CNET, who believes that this is saving the best till last. Please welcome them to the stage.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Woohoo!
Best for last, definitely. Okay, so Peter, first off, I think what's really interesting to me is that the movie industry has this kind of weird sinusoidal pattern, right, where they will invest heavily in games, and then they'll stop investing in games, and they'll invest again, they'll do license, they'll do their own, they'll do license again. So why don't you talk to me a little bit about just kind of where we are right now in that pattern, and maybe tell me, can this actually be done well? Can the video game industry, can a movie company make video games that are good?
So I think resounding yes to that question. I think
that was the easy one, right?
Yeah, let's reverse engineer your query. It's a unique moment in time. I think the media companies en masse are looking at the games part of their business in a much different manner, through a different lens. You see, companies like Warner Brothers, for example, over the last 7-8 years, take breathtaking strides in bringing phenomenal product to life, whether it's Arkham or Moderator. What they've been able to do with the Lego properties, coupled to their own intellectual property, it's definitely a left of center direction, versus where big media was a decade ago. I think the fundamental driver there is that the economics can no longer be ignored. So
meaning that video games are such a large industry now, you have to do it.
That's right. I mean, I think the interactive business at Warner Brothers drove something like $1.5 billion of revenue in the last year. So, that's nothing to sneeze at.
I wouldn't mind having that.
I wouldn't mind having that either. But the other dynamics that are happening, with the state of the games business, you've got the type of engagement you haven't seen before. And whether that's free-to-play, mobile, social tablet, whether that's DLC, whether that's, and I don't even want to call them licensed properties, but I think partnering between intellectual property and game mechanics that are creating sustainable, long-term product that lives on multiple platforms in multiple environments. That just did not exist before. So the model that used to exist was, very short shelf life, right? 6 to 8 weeks, shrink wrap, trucked, through a holiday cycle, and then you're in, you're out. And if you're moving units, you can sustain life, and if not, on to the next one. And now you've got titles that are living for years. And they're not only driving revenue, but they're creating a very unique conduit of engagement with those audiences of those intellectual properties. And that we have not seen before. So I think across the board, you're seeing a very healthy appetite and some different approaches from different media companies to how they're treating this business, but they're now looking at it very much as a business, not just an extension of their licensing and merchandising exercise.
Which is interesting. So how do you avoid the kind of boom and bust that tends to happen for a company that is working outside of its core competency? Because we see that, right, where a company will have some real success with something, and then they'll kind of maybe not have as much success, and okay, pull back, right? And it turns into this weird boom and bust cycle.
I wouldn't say that it's not in their core competency, because what it is, it's telling stories in another medium.
Okay.
So that is their core competency, and we are a hits-driven industry at our core. We are Lionsgate probably as much, if not, more than most. We are a content company, full stop. That's both exciting and at times it can be daunting,
right?
Because you're adapting intellectual property in different mediums. So what we're looking for in terms of the adaptation of our intellectual property in the realm of gaming is the same passion, the same dedication, the same vision that we look for when we look for a showrunner in television, right? With shows that we put on the air like Mad Men and Orange is the New Black. And the same way we look for writers, producers, directors of our theatrical product, Hunger Games and Twilight and Divergent, upcoming Power Rangers. So we're now considering it, as contemplatively, albeit it's a nascent part of our business.
Right.
But I don't think there's any less discipline applied to finding those partners and how we deploy against it.
Makes sense. So how does VR change the dynamic here? Right now, most of the noise that's made in VR is around video games, right? I'm sure there's some people in the audience who are like, no, there's still video in movies, but maybe you can talk to me a little bit about how you guys are looking at this and how you're thinking it through.
Yes, I mean, several different ways. So like every new medium and environment, marketing and promotion is driving a lot of the early traction.
Right.
And that's very okay, because how better to raise awareness for an emerging platform than to couple that experience to ginormous intellectual properties, right? Who wouldn't want a Hunger Games VR experience, the likes of which we just executed against our marketing team did in New York in partnership with Samsung, to a lot of, I think, well-deserved praise for that group. So it creates that lift. It's a kind of a rising tide. But some of the very discrete games products that we're developing, we have a John Wick first-person shooter game coming out first, second quarter next year in partnership with Grab Games and Starbreeze and Weaver. But the interesting thing there, at its core, and you'll understand this when the hardware ships, it is both an experience and a game. And that game mechanic and understanding that game mechanic is very much predicated on the consumption of that experience. So I think VR is giving us this wonderful hybrid opportunity, this palette to play with. Ill-defined boundaries right now. Some of the stuff that we're seeing coming out of Valve, nothing short of brilliant. You have to rip that headset off your head. And sure, there's gaming mechanics to it, and there's an underlying gaming narrative, but I would argue that the experience itself is both commercial. I think those are going to be episodic content that's derivative of both existing IPs, and there'll be original intellectual properties that are adapted within the environment. So yeah, I think some of the early excitement is from the games audience. Perhaps much of that is due to the fact that Valve and Steam, with 125 million plus gamers, there's a lot of context for gaming. Morpheus and PlayStation 4, there's a lot of context for gaming.
Of course.
With those two platforms, you have the computation power to drive a qualitative VR experience. Perhaps less so with some of the other hardware, but we're figuring it all out. I think it's one of those unique moments in time where it's so much more about the steak and not the sizzle, right? So everyone who's played with it is just overwhelmed. And some of it's got a ways to go, but I think everyone I know that's put it on is wowed. And so I think I give the hardware folks a lot of credit for not shipping prematurely. Let's wait till we get it right. This is worth waiting for.
Yeah. Although the first hardware is launching in November.
This is true.
Yeah.
But again, there's been, some of these deadlines have been pushed, and interestingly, you don't get a lot of negative blowback, because I think people are feeling like this is a real thing, not again, not smoke and mirrors, not a marketing exercise.
Right. Well, that's what's interesting to me right now is that a lot of at least the way Hollywood is approaching VR is around marketing, right? That it seems as though finding ways to take your IP and apply it to VR is still something that's very experimental at this stage. And so the best thing to do is just create experiences.
I would argue that I think, again, Jaunt recently raised, some capital from, established industry players like Disney.
Sure.
And I can tell you, my peers over there are not just looking at that as, oh, this is a great way for us to promote and market our intellectual property. There will be a degree of that. But demonstrate to me a successful medium where commercial product did not live alongside promotion and marketing. You go to a film, you're going to see trailers. You're going to see commercials when you get to the theater. You watch television, you're going to see commercials. You're going to see integrated marketing. So I think that's actually a sign of a healthy platform emerging, where there's going to be the coexistence of marketing and promotion right alongside commercial product. And I can, at our shop, we're doing, a lot of both, has been messaged to the marketplace. We're taking it very seriously on the commercial side, but working hand in hand with our marketing brethren, because again, that is a very low cost, if you will, way to raise awareness, because people are so trained on some of these massive IPs, Divergent and Hunger Games. They're showing up in droves for that experience. That's just a great way to draft behind if you're going to go long on the platform.
Sounds good. So talk to me a little bit about esports and what's going on there. I know you guys just got involved with one of the teams, and maybe you can just talk to me a little bit about just kind of where you're seeing that all play out as well.
Seeing it play out everywhere, right? So, you've got everything from ESPN jumping into the deep end of the pool, BBC recently announcing that, they're going to stream Dota 2 championships, or they're going to air them rather, they're not going to stream them. They'll be on their proper.
Airing and streaming, they're roughly.
Well, I beg to differ, but these days, cutting the cord, there's the ability to sell out these venues now domestically on par with how quickly these venues are selling out internationally.
Yeah.
It's taken a lot of folks by surprise. The quality of brands and marketing partners that are jumping headlong into the esports arena. If you think about it, there are very few sports that travel globally, right? So you've got soccer or football. You have martial arts, mixed martial arts, and depending on, where you are geographically, they could be termed something else. And esports is one of them. American football does not travel globally. Baseball does not travel globally. Hockey does not travel globally. It is one of those things where you feel that, that upsurge. And again, I'm dating myself here, but as an early investor in GameSpy Industries, way back in 99, 2000, we toyed around with some live streaming of some competitive gaming. And back then, bandwidth was not a commodity.
Absolutely.
So every time we put on one of these events, we lost a ton of money. But it was exciting to see the activity around it. And so you knew someone was going to build a better mousetrap. And clearly, these folks are out there building better mousetraps. And there's a unique fraternal nature to esports right now. So, yes, several of us did invest in a franchise, but with a lot of support from the community. Mm-hmm. Again, it's one of those kind of rising tide. Let's get some folks in there that have backgrounds in sport, in media, in technology, working with marketing partners, how to maximize those relationships. We're definitely seeing it come up conversationally a lot.
So when do I say the moment that esports has arrived? Like, does it take an Olympics to happen, like where it gets blessed by a major sporting venue? Or what does it take?
It depends on your orientation. I would say it's clearly, has arrived. Someone like myself who can operate a bit from both sides of my brain, when ESPN jumped in, that was a major thing. Mm-hmm. And the numbers were quite impressive. But I feel that, the amount of energy that is spent, online, within social environments, within conferences such as this, last year it was all VR. You could not escape the VR subject line. This year it's very difficult to dodge, the esports bullet, if you will. And that's, for those of us that have jumped into the deep end of the pool, that's a very exciting thing.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess we've got a little time if you want to ask questions from the audience, or is there anyone out there who's interested in anybody at all? Quiet
You guys just all want to get up to the bar and get your post-conference cocktails going?
You've got a Highwood man here.
GamesBeat.
Okay, so if no one, we finally have one. Okay.
So I want to do Nicole Lazaro from Zio Design, Zio Play. I'm really fascinated with the evolution of VR and as a media. And how long do you think it's going to be until VR experiences will be truly feel very different than movies? Right now, a lot of the stuff is kind of like, if you remember the early days of cinema where they put the camera in the best seat in the house and you kind of could look around, they just filmed stage plays. And then someone invented, okay, we've got frame for attention and we can cut to compress time. There'll be new stuff with VR, new kind of techniques, new language of VR. How long do you think, and what might that look or feel like?
Well, I can tell you, you know, we have a large library of content at Lionsgate, 16,000 plus titles. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of horror titles within that library, including Saw. So if you can think of a Saw-themed VR experience.
I'd rather not.
Right? There's nothing that terrifies me more than that conceit. So, and we have seen some of the demonstrations of what horror-themed VR can be. Trust you me, it is absolutely nothing like sitting back and watching a scary movie. I couldn't rip that thing off my head fast enough, but so you know, my answer to that is I think it's coming quickly. You know, I think some of it is going to have to be baked over time. I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of A/B testing, but you know, the best creators in the business, you know, the best writers, to your point about choreography, cinematographers, they're all jumping in to play with this. No one sees this as gimmicky. The conversation is not of a novelty. This is just, to your point, just yet another medium within which we can do something very discreet. But I promise you, if you're a fan of horror, I am not. There's nothing scarier than some of the stuff that we have seen.
Do you think that the way that like we're going to get a 2-hour VR movie, like I'm going to watch Hunger Games 340 in VR?
Well, God willing, by the way. I would say, you know, that I'm glad you brought that up because it is one of the ways that we will be commercializing a VR environment, which is, you know, electronic sell-through, EST of our product. So you can think about themed theaters, right? You're talking about, you know, an incredibly sophisticated quality viewing experience. You know, you get spoiled by, you know, these home audio video systems that not everyone could afford.
Right.
But you're able to buy one of these devices, you are replicating that experience.
When I love the theater, I've played with the cinema apps, and those are great, and I'm a big fan. But what I'm curious about is there's a difference between that and an actual, like, I'm in the world of the movie. So the question is, are we going to get to that point, or is that going to be something that's experiences only, and the movies are going to still remain, you know, I see it on a screen, granted, really awesome, big-ass screen on in the world, but I'm not, like, in the movie.
Yeah, again, I think you're going to have discrete examples of all of that.
Okay.
So I think there will be creators who say, no, I want you right there with us along for the ride. We've seen some of that. And then you're going to see, you know, some monetization of an existing library. And even a contemplation going forward that I don't want you that involved. It's still somewhat of a voyeuristic experience with just a much different aesthetic and a more, again, immersive consuming experience, which, you know, lots of folks are very, very interested in.
Cool. Anything else?
I have no questions for any of you.
One more? Yeah.
So video games are traditionally a very obviously interactive medium, and film is obviously very linear and has a focus on storytelling. So I wonder, in your experience, are you seeing filmmakers interested in exploring that interactive nature within VR?
Within VR.
Can I shoot the bow myself?
Yeah, no, I thank you for the master's degree in the obvious there. I think the answer is yes, right? So Lionsgate, we're investors in Telltale Games, right? And, you know, Telltale, again, their own genre gaming. Lots of folks doubted them early on. They have clearly done something different and qualitatively and contemplatively. And we have, you know, once we made that investment, so many of the creators and writers that we worked with, you know, were running at us, you know, let's figure out a way to play together. We're getting the same thing with VR. There's a lot of, you know, spending a lot of time with these types of folks. Similarly, you know, with game creators, there's a learning curve, and they tend to really want to get granular. So I think you're going to see more and more of established filmmakers jumping into the medium to play with it. Haven't seen this kind of frothiness, excitement from the creative community about something in a while, which again is nothing but very exciting.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I grab my